Namaste, this is Jyotsna again here. I'm here in New Jersey, Monroe right now, attending a very inspiring and special event on eliminating burnout from life. And this group where I am standing, I have this gentleman here. His name is Dr. J. Timapuram, and he actually gave us so much of good information about how our anatomy is designed to not take stress, or rather how we can eliminate burnout. So Dr. Jay, kindly introduce yourself and let's speak about this also, the heartfulness and the sessions that you organize, and then I would ask a few more questions.
So my name is Jay Timapuram. I'm an internal medicine physician, and I've been working with medical students, resident physicians, and patients for a few decades now. And one of my interests is well-being and health, trying to see if simple practices of meditation, regulating the mind, if those practices can enhance our inner well-being. And this is what we've been trying to study over the past 5 to 7 years now. And we have conducted a few studies and we've seen some very interesting results that support the importance of these practices and enriching our inner state that can help us get through the ups and downs of life in a reasonably serene way.
Doctor, thank you for this insight. People, always get confused between meditation, heartfulness, or any other terminology that you may use. How do you define heartfulness?
So, to me, heartfulness is a very simple, heart-based meditation practice. Many meditation practices have been in existence for a long period of time, and each meditation practice has its own signature, its own benefits. And one of those practices is heartfulness, and the one that I am familiar with is heartfulness because I've been practicing it for some time. And to me, heartfulness meditation is all about allowing us to tap into that zone of inner sublimity within our own hearts. And if we are able to consistently do a practice that can help us tune ourselves into that inner state of lightness, inner peace, inner calmness, inner settled state, how can that help us in getting through whatever we have to go through in life? And it is not just about going through what we have to go through in life. It is also about the relationship that we have with our own selves, our friends, our family members. Can we cultivate a society that is filled with harmony, joy, and positivity?
Interesting. Doctor, you being a physician, you've been pursuing this heartfulness for how long, and how it has improvised your life? I would just ask you because, people ask for proofs. People ask for, how meditation has changed their lives. But when a physician speaks, it's a different world altogether, the world of information, and the way you present it all the facts are quite enlightening. So,
from a personal point of view, I've been practicing meditation for a few decades now. And when I started the practice, it was not easy. It was not something that I can say I started the practice and it was wonderful to begin with. It took a little time for me to get used to these practices and see whether these practices can actually help us, right? And initially when I practiced meditation, it took about 3 or 4 weeks for me to even experience that there is something within that is calmer, that is settled. And when I started to experience it, when I was able to feel that inner state of calmness, when I interacted with my friends or family members or seeing patients, that inner state of calmness was able to translate into patient experience as well. A physician who's calmer will be able to calm down stressed out patient. A physician who's stressed out can stress out even a patient who is calmer.
thank you so much, Doctor, for a great session here, for your time, and to the audience, of course, if you're looking for inner peace, for inner growth, heartfulness is one way to go about it. Details will be shared in the link. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Doctor. Appreciate it.
And that's when we start experiencing stress, and when it moves further, we experience burnout. It's almost towards the end spectrum of it. And do you know how it looks? It exactly looks that way, as if there is a little strand holding us together, ready to snap. Right? Have you ever felt emotionally exhausted? Have you ever felt that there is a little cynicism creeping in? And have you ever felt that you're not performing to the best possible extent? think all of us have gone through that at some point in our lives. That's basically what burnout is all about. Right? What can we do about it? But before that, there's a guy called Brian Sexton who came to who gave a presentation to us, and he described it really nicely. And he said, it's an impaired ability to experience anything positive. Have you ever felt like the battery where it's almost drained, that there is nothing else remaining? It's basically what it is. So the question is, what can we do about it, right? And I'm going to address it through how our system behaves, how our human system behaves. And let's see. We all receive this information. There is no stoppage to this information that's coming through, right? There is the sensory information that comes through. Our eyes perceive the information. We hear a lot of things. We say a lot of things, right? And all this information that we are receiving is relayed into a small part of the brain. It's an egg-shaped part. That is our thalamus. It sits right in the middle of our brain. And within the thalamus, there are different areas where this information is segregated. And from there, the information is sent to the rest of our brain. And that rest of the brain processes this information and says, you know what? These are the thoughts that you're going to have, and these are the actions that you're going to do. Right? And if we look at that, it looks, okay, that's a fairly simple thing that I can understand. Right? But there is something more to this. Not known to many of us. There is a field that influences our thinking. There is a field that influences our actions. And that field is not known to many of us. And that is the zone of our feelings and emotions. And there is a very interesting and very nice study that was done back in 2014 by Namanma and his colleagues. More than 700 participants. That is a very large study. And in that study, the participants were exposed to various scenarios that evoked emotions. And the participants were asked, where do you feel it? Majority of them felt within their heart, within their chest, right? This is where we feel these emotions, right? And these feelings often influence their thought process. Even before the thought, it was the feelings that determined the nature of thoughts that came up. And what can we do about it, right? Have you ever felt that the thoughts of stress and burnout keep happening? And you know what? These thoughts happen because we feel something within. If the ocean is salty, the waves are going to be salty, right? If we feel something within, the thoughts are going to be somewhat similar to what we are feeling within. And how can we change it? Can we change our thoughts? Majority of us say, you just need to change your pattern of thinking. But it's not so easy to change the pattern of your thinking. There is something within, deep within, that needs to be changed in order to change your thinking. And the way we feel within needs to change. And I use this mnemonic, something that keeps us sane. SANE. Sleep, activity, nutrition, and enriching attitudes. These form the foundation of a healthy change. How many of you have had a good night's sleep last night? Good. How many of you wish you slept better? Okay. Now, out of all this, right? I feel that these 4 pillars act as a foundation for our stress, burnout. And how do these work? I want to go back to this concept of brain. A very simple concept. Just like any other organ within the body, the brain also produces trash. And when the trash builds up, imagine this brain as a city, right? There are many houses, many neighborhoods, and they produce trash. And what needs to be done? The trash needs to be collected and taken away, right? When the brain produces trash, there should be a collecting system. Nature designed a wonderful collecting system, and that is what we call the lymphatic system. And you know what? This sleep is magic. I can I have really good time there. Sleep is one of the magic elements that nature offers to us each night to get over the stresses and strains of existence. And what happens within the brain when we get into the deep stages of sleep, when the brain relaxes, right? There is the plumbing system of the brain called the lymphatic system. So it's like the plumbing system. This plumbing system often is clogged, and this clogged plumbing system needs to be emptied. And deep state of sleep, deep state of rest for the mind offers that. And this studies have come up in the last decade. I think this is one of the most fascinating discoveries made in the previous decades. And this is how it works. The plumbing system of the brain gets cleaned, and this is a state of brain when it is in the deepest stage of sleep. And recently, they've also found out that there are many other things that sleep can do, including memory consolidation. You know, when we learn things, right, we want to preserve that knowledge. Without a good night's sleep, it's impossible to preserve that knowledge. And all of us would like to have a good attention span. If you're able to pay attention to what I'm saying, maybe you had a good night's sleep. And if you're unable to pay attention, maybe it's just me. You know, if you want to have a good, healthy heart, our hearts love a good night's sleep. There have been studies where sleep deprivation increased the heart attacks. And maybe some of us would like to have a good weight, maybe some of us would love to lose a couple of pounds. And if I tell you that sleep plays a role, it's very important to know that. The reason is there are hormones that control our appetite, that control how much we eat and what we eat, leptin and ghrelin. And there was a very interesting study that was done where the participants were divided into two groups. One group had a good night's sleep, the other group was sleep deprived. And they were all given equal amounts of food. And you know what the experimenters did or the researchers did? They calculated the number of calories. If I knew, I would have probably ate a little bit lesser. But having said that, that study was very nicely done, and they looked at the number of calories that the participants consumed. Sleep deprivation led to increased consumption of calories. And you know the type of calories that were consumed? Carbohydrate-rich foods. Cookies, brownies, maybe, who knows, right? And even for us to live longer, a good night's sleep is important. There is something called telomeres at the end of our chromosomes. And these telomeres can shrink because of various reasons, and sleep is one of the aspects that protects this telomeres. Sleep deprivation can shrink the telomeres and perhaps take a couple of years of our lives. Creativity is another important thing we all love to have. Sleep plays a very important role in that. How many of you have heard of Dmitri Mendeleev, the guy who discovered the periodic table, right? There's a fascinating story about this guy. That was the time when the scientists were trying to figure out how to arrange these atoms. And Dmitri Mendeleev was one of those scientists. And there was one night when this guy was sleeping, in one of those deepest states of sleep, he gets a dream. Guess what he sees in the dream? Atoms, right? And these atoms started to arrange in a particular order. And this guy wakes up and he says, you know what? This is the periodic table. And even today, what he saw in the dream stands correct. August Kekulé, when he discovered the 6-carbon benzene ring, it happened in a very similar state, a dreamlike state, where he saw the snakes, 6 snakes, the head of one snake holding the tail of the other snake in a circle. And he says, this is the structure of benzene and this is the accepted structure even now. Even acetylcholine molecule was discovered in a similar way. Marvelous pieces of music came from deep states of sleep. Sleep has the creative potential. What the wakeful state is unable to offer, a deep restful state of the mind is able to offer. Activity, I think we covered that in the New Year's resolutions, I guess. But activity is something that I feel it helps activate the lymphatic system. Very recent studies have shown that activity also increases your lymphatic system activity and helps break up that big trash into smaller entities, which makes it easier to be cleared up. A healthy plant-based diet. It's very important. And they have phytochemicals that can reduce the inflammation. And when the inflammation within the brain is reduced, there is less trash that is produced from the brain. Enriching attitudes. The mindset plays a very important role. A healthy mindset can help us make good choices in our lives, including sleep, activity, nutrition. Meditative practices is what I'm going to focus on for the rest of my talk. This is where my research comes into picture. My colleagues and I also have a team of researchers. We work together, and our interest is the field of meditative practices to see what these practices actually do when they are put to test. And the practice that we chose for our research is heartfulness, and as it was mentioned earlier on, the core practices of heartfulness, which includes the relaxation, meditation, we have the rejuvenation technique and inner connect. These are the practices that we have studied. And what are the questions that we try to address? Let's start with a few interesting things. First basic question. In heartfulness, when we meditate, right, we very gently rest our attention within our hearts, resting on something sublime within our hearts. And when we do that, what happens to us? What happens to our brain? This is a very simple, very first question that we try to address. And what we found was that the brain waves of this guy showed some changes. If I had known, I would have dressed properly, but this is the only picture that I had. But when I was meditating, right, this is what happened. The brain waves that were reasonably slow to begin with slowed down even further. And as they slowed down, they went through almost the stages of sleep pattern, which is the stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 sleep patterns. And stage 3 sleep pattern is where we see the slowest of the waveforms called the delta waves. In the previous slides, we saw what happens when the brain goes into the deeper states of rest, right? The lymphatic system gets activated, the brain gets cleaned up. Maybe that was the reason why after this session I felt absolutely refreshed. And this was also a state where it was a thoughtless state, where even the awareness of thoughtlessness came back a little later. And in the yogic literature, this is one of the states that's termed Turiya. Some of you may have heard about this. And this is one of the beautiful conditions that meditative practices can offer. And when we experience something sublime within ourselves, right, it changes us. It is not the thoughts that changes, it is the feelings and our experiences that changes. And when we experience something profound, it has a transformative effect. And the second thing that we try to explore is, what do these practices do to our hormones, right? How many of you have heard of cortisol levels? Most of us, right? How many of you have heard of DHEAS? Yeah. So these hormones, the cortisol is our stress hormone, right? It's good to have some degree of cortisol so that we can respond, but often this cortisol levels are very high, and that may not be necessary, and it can cause a lot of negative effects. We want these cortisol levels to be at an appropriate level. DHEAS is almost like an anti-cortisol effect. It is called fountain of life hormone. It is also called the longevity hormone. And when we tried to find out what heartfulness practices do to these hormones, we found some very interesting results. This was one of the studies my colleague, Dr. Thakur, has done, and this was published very recently in 2023. The cortisol levels with 12 weeks of practice has gone down pretty significantly. And when we studied DHEAS, this is a study that we just completed. This is not published yet, and this is currently under review. We saw that the DHEAS levels increased by more than 50 points. And this something was very fascinating to me, because this is one of the hormones that can improve and even implicated in our longevity. So something that I feel very beneficial from a physiological point of view that happens to our system when we practice meditation. And the other area that we explored is telomere. We all have our chromosomes, right? We have our DNA within the chromosomes, and at the tip of our chromosomal DNA, there is a structure called the telomere. It's almost like a cap-like structure at the end of our chromosomes, very similar to the plastic bit at the end of our shoelaces or the aglets. We want the telomeres to be well preserved, and when we measure the telomere length before and after heartfulness meditation practice, we saw some very interesting changes. And telomere is also implicated in our longevity. And when we offered heartfulness meditation practice for about 12 weeks, in our study in 2017, when we published it, we saw in a younger subset of population, the telomere length actually increased with the meditation practice, with heartfulness meditation practices. And that was statistically significant. And we tried to replicate it in another study, and that was Dr. Thakur's study. And in that study, we saw an increase in the telomere length as well. So 2 studies that we have done have shown a direction of increase in the telomere length in a way that is congenial for our health and well-being. And recently, we also ventured into gene expression. Most of us, we feel that once we have a set of genes, we are done. There's nothing that we can do about it, right? True, to a large extent, that's the case. But it is not about the genes itself, it is about whether the genes are expressed or suppressed. Healthy activities upregulate good genes and suppress the bad genes. Unhealthy activities do the opposite. They upregulate the bad genes and suppress the good genes. And we try to see what heartfulness practices do. This is what we did in one of the studies where we offered heartfulness practices for about 12 weeks. This is what we found. We saw that around 875 genes were upregulated with 12 weeks of heartfulness meditation practice, and 1539 genes were downregulated. And when we looked at the post-meditation and post-control, we had 292 genes that were upregulated and 1180 genes that were downregulated with 12 weeks of heartfulness meditation practice. And this is the volcano plot showing the upregulated and downregulated genes. And this is one of the gene ontology process which looks at the categories of genes that have been upregulated. And this is the gene ontology process looking at the category of the downregulated genes. And we also looked into what happens within our cells and what are the particular pathways that are affected with heartfulness meditation practice. We saw that these are some of the pathways that are affected with the heartfulness meditation practices. And to summarize, because that's mostly from a scientific terminology, so to simplify things, right? We have the pathways that are related to neurotoxin removal. We talked about the neurotoxins that build up within the brain, right? This neurotoxin removal process is upregulated. That is fascinating. And the second thing that I also wanted to talk about is the pathways that are related to depressive behavior, the pathways that are related to oxidative stress, and these are positively influenced in terms of reduction of depression and reduction of oxidative stress. I feel that these practices have shown a pathway, at least a direction, that this is where these meditation practices can affect. There was another very interesting thing that we looked at. We saw that the DHEAS levels increased, right? And we tried to look at whether the pathway is influenced. And indeed, the pathway that influences the DHEAS levels were upregulated. So that correlates with the increase in the DHEAS levels. Within the brain, there is something very interesting. It's called the blood-brain barrier, something that is protective of the brain, right? In many psychiatric conditions, there are studies that show that this barrier is disrupted. What we saw in our study is that the practices of heartfulness seem to stabilize this blood-brain barrier. I feel the junction between the cells of the barrier is stronger. And though these studies need to be interpreted a little cautiously, but this is the direction that we are seeing, which is very fascinating. And when we look at the genes that are downregulated, the inflammatory genes, some of the inflammatory genes were downregulated. To me, stress is an inflammation, right? These inflammatory genes were downregulated. We also saw that something called clock genes. These genes are implicated with depression, and these genes were downregulated too, something that was very, very interesting. And this was the time of COVID. We saw that the viral replication process was down-regulated. That's something very interesting. And we even went deeper into heartfulness meditation practices to see if we can study the unique elements of heartfulness meditation practice. One of the unique elements of the heartfulness meditation practice is a very gentle support called yogic transmission that can help facilitate the refinement of the inner consciousness. The emotional field, the field of the zone of our feelings can be refined through these practices. And the element is yogic transmission. Can we study this? Can we do a study that looks at a scientific way of looking at this unique aspect, right? And we had volunteer trainers assist with this process, and this was a study that was done in UCSD. And what we did for this study was a functional MRI scan. And that was me lying in the fMRI scanner. And I can tell you it's not so easy to meditate when the MRI is going on. But this was done in a very simple. We had 2 sessions where the participants meditated. In one session, there was a remote somewhere who was meditating with the participant, and on the other occasion, the participant meditated on their own. Right? And we wanted to find out if this had any difference. And because this was done in a blinded way, I had no idea when this remote trainer was meditating with me. I only meditated twice. And the brain scans were compared, the 2 brain scans were compared, and we had, I think when this analysis was done, we had a total of around 16 participants, and something unique was seen. We talked about how the meditative practices influence our feelings, right? And there is a feeling processor within our brain, and that is called insula. And that insular connectivity pattern, the functional connectivity pattern was different when a trainer meditated with the participant. And to me, this is one of the most fascinating things that we have done so far. And this shows that when someone meditates with us, it can enhance our experience, it can help refine our inner territory. And it's all about resting the mind. And when we rest the mind and choose the object of that rest as something very sublime, let's call it a source of light or a source of divine light within our own hearts, whatever resonates with you, right? When we do that consistently, it is a matter of experience. And in that calmer state of mind, when the mind is settled, it makes it easier for us to navigate through the ups and downs of life in a reasonably serene way. And it is almost as if when our state of mind is at rest, the stresses and strains of life may not seem too bad. It gives us the courage and confidence to deal with it. An inner state to deal with it is what we are looking for. We may not be able to change the situation, but if we have an inner state that helps us navigate through it, why not? And what we also did was, after all this, we wanted to see when heartfulness is brought to the real world, what do these practices actually do? Right? Can we bring that serenity within to the real world and see how one can deal with this real world with all its problems? And these are some of the studies that my colleagues and I did. One of the studies was on burnout, where the physicians, nurses, resident physicians, all of them were invited to participate in this study. We had 2 groups. One group went through heartfulness meditation practice, and the other group carried on with whatever was available, and that is the EAP services and the routine services, right? And the results of the study shows that emotional exhaustion decreased, depersonalization or cynicism decreased, personal accomplishment scores increased in the group that went through heartfulness meditation practice. In the control group, the group that did not go through the practice, we did not see any of those changes. And this is also the study where the telomere was found to be increased in a younger subset of population. And we also offered this practice as a half-a-day conference to our physicians and advanced practice providers. And what we saw is that by attending that conference, the emotional exhaustion actually decreased even after a month later. Another favorite thing of mine is sleep. Something that I love to do, which I would love to get even more, but often I don't. But have you ever imagined that you're unable to sleep for at least 3 nights a week? Have you ever seen anyone who is unable to perform very well because they are very fatigued from sleep deprivation? And imagine this going on for a long period of time. We call it chronic insomnia. And what we did in our hospital was we took patients with chronic insomnia and we offered them 8 weeks of heartfulness meditation practice. And we measured their insomnia severity scores at the beginning and at the end of the study. What we saw was almost a 10-point decrease in their scores, from a score of 20.9 to a mean score of 10.4. That's a significant drop. And a lot of them have mentioned that they were able to sleep for longer periods of time and their depth of sleep also improved. And when their depth of sleep improved, they started processing their dreams. And many of them said that their dreams have come back, maybe literally true. But what we do not have is a long-term outcome, but what we do see is that if we can provide the heartfulness meditation support, it can facilitate an improvement in sleep. And residents are very dear to my heart. These are the residents that I work with, and I wanted to offer this to our resident physicians as a study. And when we did that, our residents slept much faster. The number of times they woke up came down, and they performed better. So it was a very good outcome from this study. The other area that we explored is loneliness. Because somehow sleep and loneliness are also related. A mind that is well rested will be able to socialize well. A mind that is poorly rested would want to isolate itself, it cannot want to socialize well. And sometimes the clinical community, they do feel lonely. It's one of the most loneliest professions with the physician community. So we wanted to see if heartfulness practices improve loneliness and sleep. And sometimes my colleagues ask me, Dr. Jay, how do you think meditation is going to improve loneliness? And I often tell them, loneliness is not just about the number of people that we are connected with, it is also about the meaningfulness and depth of that connection. Even if we are connected to one person in our lives, and if that connection is deep and meaningful, it can act as an antidote for loneliness. Taking it a step further, it is not only about our relationship with others, it is also about the relationship that we have with our own selves. If that inner relationship is harmonious, it can act as an antidote for loneliness. And when we offered heartfulness meditation practices for 4 weeks, we saw a reduction in loneliness, and we published the study in the Journal of Hospital Practice. And sleep, of course, improved as well. And I wanted to conclude with one study. All right, we've been practicing for many years, right? Do we hit that ceiling where, you know what, after this, there's no more benefit? This is something that, we did during the time of the pandemic, where we sent a global, this was a global study, 39 countries participated in this study. And this is a study where we had 3,164 participants, which is a big number for a study. And what we found was very interesting. The heartfulness meditation practitioners had an ability to cope with the stresses and strains. The quality of life was much better. And the other unique feature that we saw in the study was, as the number of years of heartfulness meditation practice increased, the benefits also continued to increase. So this find is a very interesting thing. And with this, I would like to say that, I welcome you all to this inner journey. It's yours. Thank you so much.
Which we clear the impressions from our system. And this helps us from preventing these impressions that we're getting, whether they're positive or negative, from becoming deeper habit patterns. And it's a really effective mechanism just to help us keep our baseline and help us set ourselves up for success when we do our morning meditation the next day. And after we do about 5 minutes of this cleaning process, we'll go into the meditation. And the meditation is very simple. In Heartfulness, you can imagine what we meditate on, the heart. And the heart is the seat of the self. So if we want to become our best selves, we have to connect to it. And as Dr. J was saying, we use this mechanism of pranahuti, or yogic transmission. So the Heartfulness trainers help us go deeper into the meditation with this transmission. If you've ever meditated before, by show of hands, who here has meditated before? Okay, good number. And 2024, it's so encouraging to see that number be so high these days. So if you've meditated without transmission, just notice how that felt for you. And then now that we're meditating with transmission, just notice if there's any different, your own internal scientific study. So we'll do the cleaning practice, which I'll guide you through, and then we'll go directly into the meditation, which will be silent for about 20 minutes. When it's over, I'll say, that's all, at which time just take a self-reflection. Whatever happened during meditation, that's fine. Some people are very hard on themselves, and they said, I can't do it, I can't meditate, I had all these thoughts. But I love this analogy in the Heartfulness way, where the wine bottle, the same opening that you pour the wine in, it has to come out. So if the thoughts are in there, sometimes they need to come out in that process, that's okay. Just notice the thoughts coming and go back into the heart. I'll do a brief reading from the spiritual anatomy related to the cleaning process, and then we'll have question and answers with Dr. J about his presentation, and with both of us if you have any questions about the meditation practice. So what you want to do is just get comfortable. The Heartfulness practice is a natural process, so there should be no constraint in the body. Let your body be upright, your breath be normal and calm, and let your eyes gently close. Make sure your cell phones are switched off. Perfect time.
So my name is Uday. I'm one of the trainers here, and it is really so nice to see so many of you who were there in October for the launch of the book Spiritual Anatomy. Thank you for coming here, and thank you, Jay. We go a long way back, almost 20-25 years. And over this time, I've also had the pleasure of meeting his father. And if you meet him, he's this professor who, exudes the spirit of service. They say that you need to do 10,000 hours of anything to attain mastery. And his dad must have given 20,000 hours of service in helping others meditate. So I think the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. You can see it in Jay and his spirit of service. Thank you. He is not going to get good sleep today because he's going to drive back to York to conduct meditation. Really appreciate it. Big hand. And Emma, thank you so much. It was a wonderful session. We will figure out the hardware, software. When you have a lot of engineers in the room, it's difficult to get consensus. But that said, I need to do a few things, and one of the things, I did raise my hand when you asked, did you sleep well or not? I said no. So my memory is a little, so if I miss something, please remind me. But first things first, I think one of the suggestions, one of the key action items that if you can take back with you today is form a meditation habit. Really make it a part of your life to see how it works for you. And we did this in the session in October, where we essentially put up this QR code, and it helps you join a WhatsApp group. And about 60 people joined that session. And we did this 30-day meditation cohort, and it's been, I think, about 120 days now. And there are many of you in this room who have been meditating every single day, right? Because they may have started with some goal, but now the heart inspires to go something beyond. So in that way, if you think about meditation, it is the art of perfecting the moving goalpost of life. You may start for stress, but then you want peace, then you want harmony, then you want joy, then you want togetherness. And that's the beauty of the inner journey, right? You keep moving from one goalpost to other, and that keeps us going. But the key is to show up every day and put in efforts to do it. And I'm very happy to share, because I'm sure all of you have been waiting for one more WhatsApp group to join. But the thing is, in this group, as I said, 20 people almost meditated consistently. Those who couldn't show up once in a while here and there, but nobody exited the group. And you know why? Because we all hope that we
Absolutely.
will be better. Hope drives us, and this is a non-judgmental group, and that's the reason why this community is here today. That's the reason why Heartfulness is here today. Is because we want to be in the company of kindred souls who want more from life. Not because our life is inadequate, we are inadequate, but in some experience of life, we have looked to the cliff, we have looked to the summit and said, here I am, there I want to be, between this and that is my behaviors, and I want to change those behaviors. And I want to change it with a group of people where I feel there is a sense of togetherness. Right? There is a sense of getting there, and there is a sense of not being judged. Right? So if that inspires you, if that moves you, become part of this group. 6:30 in the morning we meet. So you get, it's like, 2-for-1 benefit. You become a morning riser and you also meditate. Right? So that's one thing. Become part of this cohort. And what I would like you to do is, before you join, set a goal for yourself, whatever that may be. Right? You decide what that goal is. Better relationships, better discipline, better stress management. It's open to you. And I can guarantee that when you work for 30 days, you would have made more progress towards this goal than you would have ever done. And it's not because meditation is great, it's not because heartfulness is great or anything else. It's because of one singular thing, right? Attention. Energy goes where attention flows. And now you have taken the time to give attention to your heart. And what happens when you do that? You feel good. When you start your day with peace, calmness, harmony, you feel good about life. And when you feel good, you try to have a fight when you're really happy. It's really difficult, right? Because you're feeling good about life. Right? So the whole magic is about creating the right feeling in the heart, because those feelings become thoughts. Those thoughts become actions. Those actions turn into habits. Those habits reinforce your attitudes, and your thoughts, actions, habits, feelings all design your destiny. So the idea here is for us to come together and cultivate those habits that inspire us. Right? So that's about the cohort. The second thing was, I was supposed to, like we did last time, you chose the topic of burnout. We polled the audience, and the audience said, burnout it is, and thank you, Jay, for taking us from insane to sane. That helps. For the next one in April, we're going to have an amazing speaker. Right? And he has suggested 2 topics for us. The success roadmap, inside out. How following the heart's guidance leads us to abundance. And the second one is acceptance and gratitude, the 2 towers of growth, the launching pad for thriving and joy. Very difficult choice. Luckily, the speaker is the same, so you won't break any hearts. So if you could have a show of hands for the first one. And the second one? Okay, we still have. So let's do this. We will tell the speaker that both have won. We'll call him twice.